welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. And if you're on YouTube, you're also watching it. And we've got much to talk about. Good friend of the show, John Rubino, is on with us now. And, well, hey, gold is up. It broke my magic 1750 number, John. And I have said all along, we're not going to see a major movement in silver until it breaks 1750. Now we're going to find out whether I know what I'm talking about or not, which I probably don't, but there is a possibility I might here. Hey, any questions or comments for you guys out there, make sure you send me an email, kl@kerrylutz.com. We're using Zoom now. The sound quality is exceptional. I just can't figure out exactly how to turn so it looks like I'm facing the camera instead of looking out of the corner of my eyes. And I am paying attention here. I moved my monitor yesterday and it screwed up it screwed something up here, but we're trying to get it right here, John. So happy Monday here. Another day in paradise, in the people's paradise.
Hey, Kerry. Yeah, it's pretty funny you should mention gold in your intro, because we didn't talk about this show, what we were going to talk about beforehand. You know, I just chatted a little bit and then we went right to recording. But on my notes that I had written down for this, I had gold in big caps. This was something that we have to lead with, because this is getting really interesting in the market. Because normally, this is the boring part of the year for gold. There's seasonality in that market. And there's a saying, sell in May and go away with gold, because the Asians who buy a lot of gold for spring weddings tend to do that towards the end of the year. So that's when gold really rocks, in December and January. And in June, July, August, nothing much happens in this market. So it's usually really boring. But last year, gold soared in the summer, and it's doing it again this year. So, okay, so seasonality no longer matters, apparently. The Commitment of Traders report is extremely bearish for precious metals, and so apparently that doesn't matter anymore, which is the gold market we've always been talking about. You know, what happens when physical demand just steamrolls all this technical stuff, and the price is set in the physical market, and that's apparently what's happening right now with precious metals, where the price is what it costs to actually get gold and silver coins in hand, which means the price is a lot higher than would normally be the case in the paper markets. So cool, you know, it's about time. And the little gold mining stocks that you have as advertisers and that I like to buy are just killing it right now. You know, there's a lot of 10-baggers.
I'm glad you mentioned them. Like Orin is up pretty nicely. Arcana, that's been up. It's down a little bit because the lockup period on the private placements are expiring, so it's bringing more shares into the market. Asino Resources company, a Namibian gold producer run by Hayaden, and I didn't start out just to push my sponsors here. I just think it's a great example. It's up to $1.21, new 52-week high. That's Canadian. Silver One Resources, 35 cents. And they were down to like 9 cents a couple of years ago. But I think you make a very valid point here about seasonality. I'm not sure that it's dead. I just see that there's a new seasonal increase another time of the year, which on and off has worked over the years, and that was in summer, early summer, right before the Sprott conference, and you would get this thing called the Sprott bump from all of these companies who exhibited, and you'd get 500 hardcore resource investors, and they would get to kick the tires, and then after that, like around August 1, the price would settle down again. Unfortunately, this year, Sprott's going to be virtual. They'll probably get a lot more viewers and a lot more attendees, but you have to question the effectiveness, because us resource investors, we're kind of like a big club, a fraternity. And when you watch yourself losing money for so many years in a row, you need that Sprott conference to validate and reaffirm what have been very poor financial choices, if you will, with the exception of 2016. From 2011 to 2019, with the exception of that few month bull run in 2016, you were like the Maytag repairman of investors, you know?
Well, it was a long wait, from 2011 or 12 to just lately. Gold and silver were really boring while everything else was taken off.
Yeah.
By the way, that doesn't mean that gold and silver, they're outperforming most other things right now, but it doesn't mean they're the only things going up. There's a new theory in the market that now that the Fed is moving on to yield curve control, which means they're just going to control interest rates and the relationship between different interest rates going forward with an eye to boosting financial asset prices. So now it's the buy everything market, where the Fed's going to make sure everything goes up by controlling interest rates. And it almost doesn't matter what you buy, because you buy tech stocks, they're going up. You buy value stocks, they're going up. You buy bonds, they're doing pretty well. And of course, gold and silver are being swept along in all this. See, to me, the ideal investment strategy, because I had a formative experience doing this, so I have never gotten over it, is to short the market and go long precious metals. And that usually happens during times of crisis. But now in this world, it could be that we've got central banks basically actively trying to inflate every major asset class at the same time, which is just crazy, because it means that they're basically flooding the system with money, and they can do this as long as the currencies hold up. But, there's a limit to how much new currency you can create if you want to maintain the value of your currencies. So that's the end game for yield curve control, is where all of a sudden the currency starts to fall, and that forces interest rates up, even in the face of central bank trying to depress them. And there's the end. So that will be very good for gold and silver when it happens at the expense of all these other financial asset classes. So you can make money in pretty much anything right now, but that's a short-term thing. And the long-term outperformance is going to be in real assets. So, let's enjoy the gold thing right now, but with the expectation that it gets even better at some point in the future when all these other things that are up now start to fall off and money starts pouring out of those sectors and looking for a new home. And that's the parabolic move in precious metals that's out there somewhere. But this right now is pretty good. I will take what's happening in especially the junior mining sector anytime.
Hey, well, just like you're saying, everything going up. Tesla right now, as we speak, is at $999 per share. So you're probably happy you're not short on that one right now, huh?
I've been trying to short Tesla, but you can't do it in the options markets anymore because everybody else has the same idea. So put premiums, in other words, the extra money you have to pay in order to use an option to short Tesla, it's insane. It's like $300 that you have to pay extra over and above the intrinsic value of the option. Which means Tesla has to fall to 600 before you make any real money in these options. So it doesn't seem worth it. But if it was worth it, like in the S&P 500 right now, you can short that really easily using options because it's a super liquid market and the put premiums aren't outrageous. So I've been doing that. I did a little more this morning. Shorted some more of the S&P 500 this morning, on the assumption that, there's another big factor out there too that we haven't talked about yet, and that is the Fed's balance sheet. There's been this pattern of the last few years when the Fed's balance sheet is shrinking. In other words, when the amount of liquidity they're pumping into the system is offset by the drain on liquidity that is happening out there for other reasons, the stock market eventually tanks, and that forces the Fed to aggressively liquefy the system again. Well, we're in the balance sheet shrinking part of the cycle now. And in the past, that has caused the stock market to tank and then force the Fed to react. So shorting the stock market in those previous times in the cycle that are like this one was really lucrative. So maybe this is a time to be shorting again, though in anticipation of the Fed coming in and boosting stocks again. So it's a kind of a short-term short where you don't want to just stay with it for years. You want to short, make some profits, and then get out of the way when the Fed comes back in big. Which is a don't try this at home kind of thing, because it's foreign to most investors to be betting on things going down. And the timing is kind of tricky. So, this is us just talking our own books and not giving investment advice at all.
No, we don't do that. But if we're going to have a major decline in the stock markets and the indices, then the VIX, buying those calls on the VIX could be the way to go. Right now, the VIX is at 3260. And again, we're not giving advice. I always say, if you listen to my advice, you're almost certain to lose money, at least in the short run. So with that disclosure out of the way, the VIX, if you think the market's going to take a hit, you can clean up on those VIX options. Right now, probably you have to wait till it gets into the 20s again. Right now it's at 32.5. But when the VIX pops, it really pops lately. I mean, it went from like 9 to 81 intraday in like a matter of a couple of weeks. And then it trailed back. And now the standard fearless, the VIX is called the fear indicator. The standard VIX, where it's kind of calmed down, is in the mid-20s now. It's not going back to 9 and 10 again anytime soon, I would imagine, unless the Fed just decides to buy every share of stock that exists on the planet, right?
Yeah, that depressing the VIX, in other words, depressing a sign of fear in the market, is one of the Fed's new mandates, apparently. They need to elevate stocks. And by virtue of doing that, depress the visible signs of fear in the market, which means, as we talked about a lot of times here before, capitalism is dead when the government is doing stuff like that, because you no longer have a price signaling mechanism in the capital markets that tell you how to allocate capital, which means nobody knows what they're doing. Everybody's flying blind. And the system is just randomly putting money into stuff with horrible consequences out there, because a lot of that stuff probably shouldn't be invested in at these levels and will tank at some point, taking a lot of people's paper fortunes along for the ride. In a broader sense, we're already doing a lot of the things that people are talking about as the next crazy stage of this thing. Modern monetary theory, for instance, is something that most people, well, not most people, but people in the sound money community think will come along pretty shortly, when the Fed basically just gives up on trying to control anything and just dedicates itself to elevating asset prices going forward. And we're kind of already there. The idea behind MMT is that governments don't have to tax and borrow. All they have to do is just print money and finance themselves that way. And we're kind of already doing that already with the Federal Reserve buying up the bonds that the government issues and then rebating the interest back to the Treasury Department. So that in effect, we're just running the government on printed money right now. And the same thing, is true at a small scale with universal basic income, which is another late stage crazy thing that the government is going to end up doing, where they just give everybody an income financed with newly created currency. So we're kind of doing that now too with all these bailouts. We're basically giving variations of income to all the big players out there in the world, including regular people with those $1,200 things. And I guess there's a new one of those coming.
There's a new one coming. I've heard. I don't know. The details are hazy, but it appears like 4,000. I heard. I'm not sure what it's going to be, and I don't know if it's another 1,000 a person, up to 6,000 for a family. That I'm not sure of yet, but there is a new stimulus coming for certain. It won't be long before it's here. How long? How many of these are they going to do, John? I
I don't
mean,
know,
there's
but
got to be a limit.
I'm kind of liking this. So my kids aren't asking me for money lately because the government's taking care of.
That's great. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not asking my kids for money lately because the government's taking care of me,
Yeah.
so it's
See,
all
so
working good.
it's working out for everybody. And another variation of this is the big infrastructure plan that they're talking about,
Hmm.
and which was always, you would think that would have been the first choice the minute Trump got elected. But they took their time about it because that's something that has bipartisan appeal,
Yeah.
where you just come in and you rebuild the old roads and the old bridges and you build new airports and everybody gets paid for doing that work. And then
The
those things
unions
are,
love it. The
yeah.
unions,
Oh,
everyone loves it.
unions love this stuff. And then it
Yeah.
makes, in theory, it makes the economy more efficient going forward to have high quality infrastructure. So they pay themselves, it pays itself off. But of course, there's a limit to that. And there's also a philosophical limit, which is that governments can't really know what to spend the money on.
Mm,
So they're going to spend it badly. So it's not going to generate the cash flow that
that's
well spent
correct.
infrastructure money would, So, but anyhow, that's coming too, and that's a bailout of huge sectors of the economy because you put a ton of people back to work doing this stuff. So in effect, you're giving them an income via the government,
Yeah.
and that's, I guess, marginally better than just giving people money straight out. But in the end, it all has to be borrowed. Or in the modern monetary world, it has to be created out of thin air and dumped into the market. So either way, it comes back to the currencies. We can play these games as long
Yeah.
as we have currencies that are of value. But
Value
anyhow,
in quotes.
yeah.
Value in quotes. Well,
Well, perceived value.
yeah.
Yeah.
PJ O'Rourke once wrote in a book, I think it was Parliament of Whores, that, at least when the government spends the money on defense, you like see stuff. You got like, missiles and airplanes and tanks and all that. But when the government spends it on social welfare, you have no idea. There's no uh, tangible result of the funds. You know, you really, it's like, why is anybody going to work anymore after all this is done? That's
Well,
what I want to know.
yeah, I mean, there's that kind of moral hazard at the end of this road because if you give somebody who's unemployed a few $100, they're going to spend it and it's stimulative. But beyond a certain point, it causes more distortions in the market than it solves.
Correct.
And yeah, we're headed for that point. But hey, Kerry, if we have time, let's depart from the economy a little bit. I have a couple of things that just popped
Sure.
up this morning as I was
Okay.
doing my links list that are pretty funny about today's world. Well, not funny, but ominous, I guess,
Ironic.
would be a better word.
Maybe
Yeah,
ironic, a
bizarrely
little
ominous. But
ironic. Yeah.
the Jeffrey Epstein thing.
Hmm.
He's dead, so he can't testify. But his partner in crime, Ghislaine Maxwell,
Yeah.
is still out there, and apparently she's just hanging out at the houses of various rich people in Europe who are taking care of her for some
That's
reason.
so
Now, how could
nice.
that be? Now, the reason that I wanted to talk to you about it because you mentioned a long time ago, you just tossed out something about these guys,
Yeah.
Jeffrey Epstein in particular, working for Mossad. In other words, he was,
Uh-huh.
and you said he might be an Israeli agent who was doing the pedophile thing in order to entrap a lot of rich, powerful people and
Yeah.
blackmail them.
Honey trap.
Yeah, for Mossad,
Hmm.
for the Israeli government.
Among
So,
others.
but what happens if that turns out to be true? I mean, if there's some way somehow that somebody ends up proving it, which is unlikely, I guess, since the people in charge don't want it to be proven, and they apparently have the ability just to kill anybody that might testify. So, but that would be one of these scandals of the century if it's
Well,
true.
so that guy who was the Secretary of Labor that they forced out because he'd been the U.S. attorney for
Hmm.
Miami, when they asked him, somebody at some hearing or whatever, why did you agree to this? He said it's because of the intelligence community, something to that effect. I can't remember that guy's name. He was a Hispanic guy, and he, kind of negotiated the deal, and then they forced him out because he didn't get a big enough sentence. He let Epstein off with a slap on the wrist, but he said it was because at one time, I guess they caught him on an off moment, somebody, and he said, no, it's because of intelligence. And the intelligence community basically gave him his orders. So something was going on here that was not kosher with Epstein, and I don't believe he was just blackmailing all these people. We know he had massive surveillance in all of his properties, so he wasn't just blackmailing them for money. I just don't think he could have gotten away with it for as long as he did. There had to have been more to it, and he probably was some type of intelligence operative. The theory was that his mentor there, or his client, Leslie Wexner from Limited, somehow was mixed up with intelligence, Israeli intelligence. So it's possible, but I don't have any facts about that.
But he was good friends with both Trump and Bill Clinton and Hillary, so
Yeah,
if this stuff comes out, it would just be,
well,
a book length story that would be so much fun to actually find out about. So.
he had a falling out with Trump, and Trump threw him out of Mar-a-Lago because he was hitting on some minor employee, or some employee whose father was a member of Mar-a-Lago, and Trump found out about it and tossed him. So they hadn't been friends for quite a while, and supposedly in that whole when he finally did get caught, Trump was a cooperating witness or source for the Palm Beach County, or for Palm Beach County Police Department, for the Palm Beach Town Police Department. The county's different. The county attorney is the one that let him off and basically wasn't even going to charge him. He wound up staying weekends at the Palm Beach County lockup, or he'd have to go there at night. He was on work release. So I guess so he could blackmail more people. They let him go out during the day, and then who the heck knows? I mean, who knows if he ever really went there or not? If he ever spent a night in jail? It wouldn't surprise me if he didn't. John,
Well, he was connected. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
One other thing that's actually, a lot like the Jeffrey Epstein thing. It's funny but terrifying in its implications. Is in the UK, a guy was just convicted of a crime and fined for calling another guy a leprechaun.
Is this
a leprechaun?
True?
This is
true, or is this
I'm pretty
the
sure
Onion?
it's true.
Is this the Onion? Come on, this does.
Well,
it sounds absurd.
It's hard to separate. Well, the Onion. I don't know whether they're gaining or losing audience now as the world kind of starts to imitate them.
Life imitating the Onion.
yeah. It's because a lot of their stuff, at least their tone, is coming true. A lot of the things they used to make up are starting to be true. But this is part of the new generation of hate speech laws that are being enacted in different places, where the whole freedom of speech thing is being supplanted by the freedom to not be offended. Yeah.
Or insulted.
And when you think about that, that's really an astounding change in 1984. Yeah, it is, because who decides who's offended and whether they deserve to be offended or not. And you're right. I now need to look into this leprechaun story to make sure it didn't show up in the Onion, but I don't remember the source, but I saw it as something that was legit. And I think I popped it in the category of war or some, creeping fascism in the links list that I put up, because that's the kind of thing that and it's fairly common now in the modern world to have laws like that. The US, we don't have any laws that are that crazy, but we've
Yeah.
got a lot of behavior that is that crazy, where people, cancel
Mm.
culture, where
Yes.
if you say something that is considered to be politically offensive, but is protected by the First Amendment, your life can still be erased by everybody demanding that you be kicked off Twitter, and that nobody
Yeah.
let you
Twitter
speak
mobs.
anywhere. And yeah.
Yeah. Well, what about the statues being torn down all over the place? They don't even know whose statue they're tearing down anymore. They tore down Ulysses S. Grant, uh, who single-handedly, arguably, well, with some help, obviously, won
Mhm.
the Civil War, which abolished slavery, and they're tearing down his. And then Teddy Roosevelt, the trust buster, first populist president, arguably, they're going to take down his statue in front of the Museum of Natural History. I mean, what is
But
with this? Like, to
the,
erase history is somehow, if we can erase history, then we don't have to think about it and we don't have to learn from the mistakes of it. I don't understand what they hope to accomplish here, other than to destroy history so they can, whatever their agenda is. I don't even know, John. I don't get it.
well, yeah, this is a complicated one, because I could get how, if if you are certainly if you're an African American walking by statues of
Mm.
people who were segregationists, or who owned slaves or something like that, would be an uncomfortable thing. But the erasure of history is, of course, that's it's something out of Brave New World in 1984.
Yeah.
Again, something where the
Yes, it
only
is.
our only history is what the current history books, which are written by the dictatorship, say is true.
It's like Russia.
And yeah, well, did you see in the UK that they had to put scaffolding up around a statue of
Yeah,
Winston
Churchill.
Churchill?
Ah,
So we I understand the impulse, and there were probably a Confederate general outside the college that you go to or something like that. I can understand how that would be offensive, but
mhm.
it needs to be really discriminating when we start this kind of a debate,
And you
because
can't
there are a lot
stop
of
it.
people who are giants. Winston Churchill,
Yeah.
he was obnoxious in some ways, but
Oh, yeah.
people who live really big lives, there's usually a lot of bad mixed in with the good, and you kind of in a way have to separate the art from the artist, because
Yes.
Winston Churchill almost single-handedly
Yes.
stopped
Say,
Hitler from taking over Europe.
I
If
would
he
say
wasn't there,
single-handedly, he did. He did. If
yeah,
he wasn't there, forget it. I
yeah.
mean, he was a man that, that history was waiting to assign his task, and
So
he was there. And he's larger than life, and yeah, like, he certainly was brutal to the colonials in various British possessions around the world, putting down rebellions and such. But the guy, they wouldn't exist without him. They wouldn't have had the will to fight on. It was his will single-handedly pushing them to survive and to win. And yeah, like, but look, it's getting crazy. They want to rename Columbus, Ohio to Flavortown because it's named after Columbus, and he did so many bad things to the indigenous native peoples of North America. And then New York is named after the Duke of York, who was a huge slave trader. So we got to change that. And where does it end? Um, you know, like, maybe I can go along with the flags, that they shouldn't be Confederate flags for the states' flags, like Mississippi. I can kind of go with that, but you know, the Civil War wasn't just about slavery. They still call it the War of Northern Aggression. But the one thing we can all agree on is, if there was no slavery, there would have never been a Civil War in all likelihood. So it really does come down to slavery in the end, even if it wasn't this sole cause of it. But to erase history is to erase any knowledge, John, any knowledge Yeah, maybe you don't want their average 12-year-old to be able to assemble a nuclear bomb or to manufacture LSD. Okay, so you got to have a little bit of control of knowledge, but to erase it from the planet, from our collective memory, is sick.
Well, hopefully this plays out the way most things do in a democracy, where you have some really strong opinions on each side of an issue, and you end up with a compromise that doesn't make anybody happy, but doesn't, send everybody out into the streets.
Yeah. Well,
And, in this case, we definitely, obviously, need to present our history with some more nuance and some more
context.
context. Yeah.
Context is so crucial.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
And
George Washington was like at 160 slaves. All
he
right,
did. Yeah.
and so did and so did Jefferson. But to go pull down, you know, you got to have the context of the times. These people uh, weren't in their understanding. We still have slavery in the world. Got to realize that, but these people were in the context of their times, and that's how they acted. And to like go all one way or the other about it, to try to erase their existence, something wrong with it. Anyway, I'm enjoying the new video format so much that we've run long. So we got to cease. We got to end till next week. But this was fun, and let us know what you think about the quality of the video and the presentation. And make sure you take a look at John's site, which is dollarcollapse.com, and ours financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Both have free newsletters you should sign up for. And any questions or comments, emails, well, obviously, so many of you YouTubers leave them on the site, and I try to answer them all there. But you can always email me, and I'll pass it on to John. We've got a bunch of emails that maybe we'll cover next week, John. KL@kerrylutz.com. That's KL@kerrylutz.com. And that is it for now, John. And we will catch up with you next week.
Okay. See you, Kerry.